evening. I would like to call the Special Services Committee to order at 6:55. Item 1 on our agenda is the approval of December 16th, 2021 Special Services minutes. Is there a motion? So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2 is enrollment data, which you can find in our backup. Dr. McDonald?
So we continue, we always watch the class sizes. All of our class sizes are well under the state recommended and the board policy. We had been watching the grade 4 classrooms at William Allen School. They were at 27, which is still below the 30, but they're down to 24, 23. Some of that is just from Mr. Gilpatrick moving things around to try to make those class sizes smaller. On the overall enrollment, you'll see that our numbers in the elementary are starting to go up because students are starting to come back now that they've been vaccinated. And at the high school, we had a significant increase in the grade 11 and grade 12 students, looking at where those, the 17 and 16 respectively, have come back from. Some of them have been students that we're trying to do at-home programs that have decided to return because they need to complete credits. It was very challenging. It's challenging to teach yourself some of those subjects. So we do have a lot of students returning, and our overall enrollment in the K-12 is up 36 students, and in P-12 is up 42 students.
Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yep.
We have class sizes, PK through 5. Do we not do class sizes for middle school and high school?
It's 30. Or if it's a lab requirement, then you can only have enough students in that can fit in the lab. So sometimes the lab space is limited to 24 or 25. But we follow the state for the high school, middle school, high school, recommended by ED 306-17 is 30.
30 or below.
30 students or below.
Any other questions or comments regarding enrollment? Okay, item 3 is bus data, which is also in our packet.
We continue to be in constant communication with our bus transportation director, and we do not have any concerns about bus sizes, the number of students on. We do have more ridership. Ridership is definitely up as students are returning to school and becoming more comfortable, but we are not at any capacity yet.
Yeah, Mr. Downs.
How are we doing, because I know this was a question during one of our campaigns, and buses for field trips.
Field trips are busing.
And field trips, I'm sorry.
Athletic events?
There you go.
We don't have, if the students have to leave before the high school, middle school bus runs are done, then we cannot provide bus transportation because we don't have them. If they have to leave for an activity after the high school, middle school bus run is done, then we are able to transport.
Mr. Downs.
And this is due to bus drivers. They just don't have them, correct?
We just don't have enough bus drivers, yeah. I think we're 3 buses down right now, which has been okay because we've been able to redistribute routes. I know it seems to have become almost a full-time job for Mrs. Perkins to work with the bus company to recalculate routes and figure out how to get all kids picked up at a reasonable time without having them be on a bus for a long time. Some school districts are at 2-hour bus rides right now because they just don't have enough busing. But we've been fortunate that we've been able to combine routes and shift things and allow students to get to school at a reasonable time.
Mr. Bullier.
Would this be the area that for reporting of the cost for transportation regarding special services compared to budget, or that should be that via special services request?
The special ed.
The special ed cost, so that's what I was referring to, is like transportation cost is always the area for special ed that we struggle with, that's different from our contract, obviously. So I was just looking at comparatively, compared to budget, how are we doing in terms of the cost of providing transportation, practice, replacement, whatever it is? Would that be in this committee, or would that be in another committee?
Is it okay for Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be something I would think for this committee, Sarah, if that is okay with you. I don't happen to have that exact number on me, and I can certainly find it for absolutely next time.
That be something reported in with the bus data.
Okay.
That's a target that we never seem to watch and trend and have a understanding, so when we go into budget season, we're always like, yeah, we'll see how it goes.
So I can tell you how, so again, I've been here for 6 months. In my past district, when we looked at, or my past districts, when we looked at budgeting, what we would do is we would look at, we had a formula that we would apply. We'd say, okay, this is our current contract for this many students. I anticipate, because again, students move in, student moves out. Some children need transportation one year and the next year they don't because we've been able to address that issue. But roughly I go, okay, I expect that I'm going to have this many students that need transportation. I anticipate this many out, this many in. And then I look at the contract for this year. I look at my contract will be for next year. If I don't have it, I increase it by 5% because the DOE will set the rate that our service providers can increase their rates by. And one year it was as high as 9, and I just couldn't put that in the budget. I'm like, I can sit with 5. And then I look at the children, and typically I have a list that I keep in my budget spreadsheet that's personal to me. It's my own document where I go, in school X, I budgeted for these children. In school Y, I budgeted for these children. So that way, when the next year comes around, I can look and go, oh, hey, I budgeted for Sarah, but Sarah didn't take transportation. Ooh, but I didn't budget for Sandy, but Sandy did. So, okay, we can flip those out. Sandy might be a slightly increased cost because perhaps we're busing her to an out-of-district placement or across the district where we weren't, busing Sarah that way. But I actually can have a pretty clear sense of what it's going to be, so I can hit it fairly close. What has, and I was fairly good, I think, at actually doing that and coming in very, very close. What did trip us up was COVID. And for COVID, it's the lack, first of all, the lack of busing for that first year. And then, obviously I wasn't here for how things went. The other thing that really trips us up is we don't have bus drivers. So special education buses have very different requirements, especially depending on the bus. And so right now, we are unable to find drivers to fulfill our runs that we have. And so suddenly, what happens is, this company X won't do it. I've got to provide this transportation. So now I'm purchasing transportation at a higher rate than I otherwise would have. So when we get to the end of the year, because again, I'm new and I'm getting those spreadsheets set up and that organizational system put in place, I'll meet with the BA and we'll go, okay, this is what we had, this is how it played out, and hopefully we'll have a feel, because part of what's happening for special ed transportation is related to what's happening at the DOE and the people they have and the personnel they have. So hopefully we'll have a better sense. So she and I will be able to go, okay, I think these are going to clear out. I don't think we'll have to use this particular company anymore because this company can sustain us. So there is a process. It's just getting that in place.
It would just be great to learn at these meetings, and that's always a target that we never seem to be able to say, okay, well, supplies, we can get
Yes.
a good or 2% increase, we're fine. This is always going to be a target, just get to learn it, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Any other questions or comments regarding bus data? All right, moving on to item 4. Item 4 is attendance data, which is also in our packet. Dr. McDonald?
Our attendance data has stayed very consistent. I kind of expected more of a dip going into the winter with the number of students that we have in and out for either being sick or potentially having symptoms. And we're actually very, very consistent, so I'm pleased with that. We do have a committee that meets, an attendance review committee that meets this year monthly on students that we see could have truancy issues. Oftentimes, those are students that have had siblings that might have had the same issue. They might have siblings in other schools. There might be strategies that have worked for a particular family or a community resource that we can provide. We've looked at that data today just before the meeting, and we only have 2 elementary school students that are gone over the 20-day unexcused attendance mark. So that's really not too bad, and we have a meeting set up with that family next week. It's often hard to get families that have significant truancy problems to come to meetings, but we always make the attempt, and we also have a truancy officer that has done home visits for them.
Mrs. Stokes?
I just have a question. When you look at the different ones, so I'm just looking at Chamberlain, it says grade 14.
Yeah,
That's preschool, kindergarten,
I had the same
or
question.
preschool.
What's
Preschool,
grade-
right? 14 is preschool?
Preschool. What
Preschool.
about 15?
15 is 0.
What's
Yeah,
grade
4,
15?
so
14
14
is
is
what?
Preschool, right?
Yeah, both calls.
Kindergarten. 14 is kindergarten, 15 is preschool.
What
which is totally kind of misnumbered in your brain.
what's
Yeah.
Bud Charleston?
And then, can I ask one more question?
Mhm.
Under out of district, it says it's 100%. Is that because it's not reported to us, or is it really 100%?
We collect attendance data from out of districts, and it's reported to, I think, Jen Doherty?
Yes.
Yeah, and then Jen reports it, so.
So every single out of district student has gone to school every single day, because it's 100%?
Well, we're looking for unexcused absences. So if they're excused, the parents called them in, something's happened, so it's that unexcused piece. And typically, when we have a child that's in an out-of-district placement, the communication between the school district and the parent is pretty intense and pretty involved. So there is a lot of communication around, we won't be attending, because usually non-attendance requires that we do a couple other things during the day to make it so that they have their program when they come back.
I mean, I was just impressed, so. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments under
Are we,
attendance?
are we tracking at all the excused absences due to COVID? Do we have any numbers on that? Or-
There's a code that they put in, I don't remember what it is, when it's an excused absence, but each school will put in there's an explanation that they put in. I believe that the nurses are keeping data on kids that are absent due to COVID symptoms or COVID. I don't have that information, but we could ask the nurses if they can provide that. I'm sure it's not easy for them to pull that together right now with everything else
Right,
that they're doing.
right, I don't want them to do any more
Okay.
work than they're doing.
Okay.
Please, no. No. All right, any other questions or comments? Moving on to item 5, special education update. Ms. Reinhardt.
Thank you. So you have my brief kind of snapshot in front of you. It looks very similar. There's a few little adjustments based on children's needs. I did keep the piece about the cost for students that are placed or placed through DCYF in there. This is a continuing issue that we are continuing to work on to resolve. And I share that simply because these costs can be substantial and significant. And right when I started, I dealt with the DOE around a few of these particular situations. And so it's just ongoing. And so my goal is just to make you aware that as I look and think, about what our budget lines look like, what we see when we do budget reports, and the impact, the drivers that may not be at the school district's control, I do want to just bring that to your attention. And then if you wanted me to answer any other questions around placement costs or anything like that, Sarah, it's up to you.
How many students do we currently have out of district? We're missing that total number.
Give me the total number. I'm trying to think, I believe the total number is approximately 67, and I'm gonna say approximately, because it's not a hard and fast number, because when we count that number, we say, these are the students that might have been placed out of district by the court, which then forces the school district to make different decisions if they're special education or if they're not. So we have that, and those kids oftentimes move and shift. So today I might meet with Jen Anderson and that child's in a home.
Yeah.
Oh, no, now they're in a place. So then that number shifts and changes. But I do believe it was approximately 67, but I'll make sure that information's on the next
And the
report.
breakdown's helpful.
The breakdown to which piece?
Court order, DCYF versus our
Sure.
students that are in district but placed out.
Yep.
Just so we can kind of keep a running total, so we're aware. And then, of course, those moving back into district too.
Yes, and we have had some move-ins where children are already out of district place, and that's a different conversation for the IEP team, right? Because then we ask ourselves, really, what is FAPE? And is moving a child so suddenly FAPE? And typically,
But tracking that data, so we
Yeah.
know who's coming back in,
Sure.
how many are coming back. Yes, Mr. Boyer.
So where it's in parentheses, 402 students, are you talking about the rest of the costs for court-placed students? That's not 402
It's-
students.
It's a code.
it's a code,
That's a
402
code.
students. So you're gonna hear
Yeah,
people
thank you.
talk about 402 students, they're gonna say, oh, so like, kind of what Sarah's referring to, like if I wrote a chart, depending how I read it, I might write 402 students. So that lets you know that the court involved, the DCYF involved, and that's how we refer to
I
them.
think I need a key. Can you simplify that for us?
Yes, that is special ed.
And the acronyms for special ed are not necessarily the same for regular ed, so.
Yes, and then you can
Yeah.
switch dates and they can be totally different.
Terms, we appreciate that.
Yes.
Mrs. Stokes?
So I just want to clarify, so out of the 67, you already asked how many are court mandated, so we'll get that information next month.
Yeah.
I know in the past, years ago, we had a list of all the potential schools that we could send kids to, because we were talking about the cost, and I think with the budget coming up and new board members, our old Director of Student Services, Christian Allison, gave us a list of potential schools and what the cost of those schools could be, and including transportation. So I'm not saying that it's going to be easy to get, but I think it would be wise for us to look at what the potential cost of out of district. And I believe she broke it down into like tuition, transportation, and I think she even had a list for like if we had to supply books or whatever. So I just think when we're looking at the budget and we're talking about what the cost is, I understand that court mandated, we don't have a choice, but looking at what the cost of those potential schools are so we can see exactly, because they varied greatly. And at the time, I believe, we were giving parents a choice, like you could choose from like these 3 schools to go to, and that stopped. That was
So that would not be FAPE if we gave a parent a choice, right?
Well,
Yes.
that stopped, but I think it would still be good for the board to see what those costs and tuitions could be of the schools that either we don't want, of course, to identify anybody, so we wouldn't want to know how many kids are going to what, but a list of the schools and what their expenses are so that the board can see.
So I believe that, so let me ask if this is kind of a clarifying question, is that okay,
Yeah.
sir? If that's what to make sure what you're asking. I believe that the DOE does publish a list of these are all the schools that are New Hampshire approved that children can be placed at by school districts. And it comes with like, this is your base rate. And what becomes very important about that base rate is it depends on the school. So some schools we can have, both Sandy and I can go to the same out-of-district placement. Her program might be $40,000. Mine might be $70,000 because I will have a la carte services. I might be hearing impaired, need a teacher of the DAF. And so my program is a little more expensive, or hers doesn't require the same thing for her to access her fee. So I can see if the DOE has published that list again, where it just says this is the school, this is kind of their base tuition. And to go back to the idea of choice, typically when the team does a placement, the IEP team says, okay, this child is, I'm just going to go with a very simple one because it's very familiar to me. This child's hearing impaired. Well, she needs an out-of-district placement, but there's only like 3 or 4 schools that take children with this particular type of hearing impairment. So we're going to go as a team, and we're going to look, the out-of-district coordinator, and we're going to look at these and see which program is most important. And then the team, yes, the parent is part of that team, but the team as a whole decides what is FAPE. And then we say, this is what we think FAPE is. And parents may agree or disagree. And that would be our process for an out-of-district placement. But I can see if I can find that list for you, because it could already be just generated by the DOE.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want an entire list. I would want a list of schools that maybe we've used in the last 10 years. You know what I mean? If we're looking at a huge list of schools in New Hampshire, would that be a very long list?
Are these the approved private special education program
Yes.
schools? I'll send you the link.
Thank you.
It's the right one.
Do you know how many schools are on
Is there
it?
maybe 25?
It's different categories, so we can approximate 24. Because you have St. Charles and Rochester with the Municipal Youth Center. You can go down to Monarch for different services needed. So that's a level that I would say you can tell us.
Yep.
And then I had one more question for you, Ms. Reinhardt. So there's a deadline that we have to file to the state to get the reimbursement for the court-ordered placements. Now, is that $50,758 per student? Is that a cap? That's the max that we're responsible for?
For last year, yes.
For last year, okay.
Yeah. And so we have to file all our paperwork with the state by July 31st.
Okay.
So if you consider when I came here August 9th, and I was going, I'm already behind trying to rectify what we need to, the issues that were coming up with these particular placements.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Next item is item 6, the 5-year plan. So for this term, we are restructuring the 5-year committee. So I just wanted to take a moment to update everybody. So moving forward, the 5-year plan, or the 5-year committee, will have the chairs of all the subcommittees serving on it, and it'll be chaired by Mr. Boyer. he came to Chair Lynch and myself with the request of chairing it and had the idea of the restructuring, how having the chairs of each subcommittee serving on 5-year would allow for that direct communication from 5-year committee right back to the subcommittee. And also in that discussion, having it on its own night so that it's not following all of the other subcommittees. That way, if we need to have staff attend our 5-year committee, it's earlier. They don't have to get through 3 committees before 5-year begins. And it just also gives it more attention that way too. So that's the restructuring that's going to take place. And it's now going to be meeting on Mondays, the Monday following this night of committees. So our first meeting is on this coming Monday, January 24th. So, Mr. Boyer, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, just an exciting opportunity that we can, the foundation's been formed, but it's good to have all committees present for communication purposes, so it's good.
And for our 5-year plan for this committee, we'll just continue receiving our quarterly special ed updates by Ms. Reinhardt. Item 7, public comment. No one from the public, so we'll close public comment. Item 8, other. Does anyone have anything for other? No? All right. Item 9, adjournment. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.